What are the Minnesota Vikings going to do without Christian Darrisaw? They can't actually replace Darrisaw, but somebody's got to do the job of left tackle. We're going to talk about some different options that the Minnesota Vikings have in order to fill that spot. Plus, the trade deadline is 8 days away. And a quick preview of the Indianapolis Colts as we have the conversation beginning about how to stop Anthony Richardson in that Colts offense. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness, with me as always in the top left corner. He is producer Dave. Dave, you're looking awfully red today.
Yes.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good,
kind of
good.
Relaxing
We're gonna have
weekend.
You know what? It is kind of nice to not have your teams play football. The Vikings played on Thursday, obviously, so we got that out of the way. The Florida Gators had a bye week, which is a little odd considering the Saturday before November is usually Florida, Georgia, but that is going to be next weekend, the second Florida, Georgia. So I got a relaxing weekend of, hey, I just get to enjoy football. And every now and then it's really, really nice. And I really shouldn't complain because my entire life is football and it freaking rocks, but it is nice to kind of have a little bit of a reprieve. Some really good football games yesterday, including the Chicago Bears doing the greatest thing of all time, finding a cool way to lose and making me smile. I love that. That was just absolutely brilliant. But we're not here to talk about the Chicago Bears. We're here to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. Let's be honest, they got some devastating news on Friday afternoon when Kevin O'Connell announced that Christian Darrisaw, the star left tackle, out for the season with torn ACL and MCL. Just brutal news. I said it on the post-game show. It's one of those things that's just tragic. There's nothing wrong with the play call. There's nothing wrong with the decision to run the ball at the 3-yard line with like 30-some seconds left. That's a standard play call that everybody makes. Every now and then, you're going to get bad results from a standard call that there's nothing wrong with. It's not the call. Sometimes shit just happens and it sucks. And that's what the Vikings got. And they're going to be without Darrisaw for at least the remainder of the season. And he may miss some time at the beginning of next season. My guess, it's all going to depend on when the surgery is. So if the surgery happens relatively quick, he could be ready by training camp. But because he has MCL damage, that complicates things. That complicates things a lot. And we saw that with TJ Hawkinson. He had to wait over a month for his surgery because he had to wait for the swelling in the knee to go down. Now, because they're actually repairing the ACL, supposedly with Christian Darrisaw, maybe they go in and have the surgery earlier. With Hawkinson, the damage wasn't substantial enough to repair surgically, so they wanted to just wait for the healing process to begin and the swelling to go down, which is completely fine. That makes a lot of sense. So we'll kind of see what the timeline looks like for Darrisaw as we learn more. But right now, it's about moving forward, and the Vikings have to figure out how they're going to replace Darrisaw. I wrote a piece for A to Z Sports earlier today, being Monday, talking about the different options to replace Darrisaw. Dave, on the surface, what do you think is the best option to replace Christian Darrisaw right now?
Move Brandel out to left tackle, put Reisner in at left guard.
Why do you think that? Because that's something that was mentioned almost off the top by multiple people. And the one thing, being that you're a former offensive lineman, Dave, it feels weird to replace two spots when one guy gets hurt, because that's essentially what you're doing. You have your left tackle go out. Now you're going to replace left guard because you're replacing left tackle. Does that make the most sense? Because now you're kind of essentially replacing one whole side of your line that can mess with continuity. that can mess with a lot of different things, especially with that left guard center relationship. Now, the catch is Dalton Risner was the team's left guard last year. So how much will that really impact it? It's an interesting dichotomy to have that conversation, because it's not to say that, hey, maybe Blake Brandel is the best player to kick out and be your left tackle. Maybe he is. But at the same time, you're replacing left guard. So as a former lineman, kind of walk me through your thought process there on why you would make that decision.
Well, the other options are start Quisenberry, and he came in and substituted. He's an okay older tackle, nothing great, nothing special. Or bring up and start your rookie, Walter Rouse, which there's some I would like to see, but the smart move, because Brandel played some left tackle last year, knows the playbook, knows everything, knows the position. Risner knows left guard, and all you're doing is shifting Brandel out, which he'll just revert to a bigger kick step. I think playing guard will help him at tackle. And then Risner comes in and does his thing. Now, is that what I'm thinking? That's a bigger gain or a lesser loss than if you started Quisenberry or if you brought in Rouse. That's why I'd do it.
So the Rouse thing is interesting, and I don't think he's ready. I think there's a reason why he's always been the guy who they haven't prioritized. They haven't even, I don't even think they've activated him for one game yet this year.
No, they haven't. He's in the rookie development. Now the deal with Rouse is strong. And if you got to develop somebody on the fly, put the strong guy in. Whereas Quisenberry is a mediocre tackle. Great for coming in when somebody gets hurt, but not a starter. And whereas I think Brandel is a starter quality.
So we have obviously talked a lot about the PFF data this year and how we don't necessarily agree with it, how we think the math has changed in how they look at things. If you were to look at the data, if you were to look at the data behind Blake Brandel in 2022 and David Quessenberry in 2023, just by looking at the PFF data, by efficiency, by grade, by pressures allowed, Quessenberry's the better tackle. And he did it on both the left and the right side. Because remember, he started a couple games for Christian Darrisaw, or played significantly in a couple games because Darrisaw got hurt. And then Brian O'Neill got hurt. I believe it was a high ankle sprain at the end of last year. So he got significant playing time. 331 offensive snaps, 94 left tackle, 236 at right. Overall grade of 64.8 with a pass buying grade of 68.3. 16 pressures allowed, but an efficiency rate of 96.1%. So not bad, especially when you look at an overall level, because when you have a guy replacing somebody like Christian Darrisaw, one of the big things here, Dave, is you're not expecting them to be Christian Darrisaw. You have to modify what you're doing and what you're asking them to do. You can't ask him to be Darrisaw because that's asking for disaster. So you're going to have to modify your protection somewhat. How much you're going to have to modify? That is an interesting question. And one that, quite frankly, I don't have the answer to right now. I think you're going to have to give him more help, more chips with running backs, tight ends, and that's going to be a really big factor.
Well, Darrisaw was obviously, you could put him on an island and have him solo whoever the best edge rusher was. They're not going to be able to do that anymore. They're going to have to either go heavy on the tight ends or bring a running back to chip or shift protection over if needed, depending on the play. They're going to have to. They're going to have to scheme for it. That Darrisaw is not there.
I think there's a decent chance, Dave, that we may see a significant amount of Josh Oliver because he essentially is like an extra tackle and putting him on the left side. TJ Hawkinson coming back, he can chip and then go out into his route, especially with a lot of the shallow routes he runs like choice, which is something that they spammed a lot with Kirk Cousins. I think that could be a really big factor here. Let me kind of talk through Brandel's data from 2022, because remember, he got multiple games of reps because Christian Darrisaw suffered those concussions. You played 181 pass blocking snaps at left tackle, 13 pressures, and 7 sacks allowed for a grade of 55.3. Brandel's problem is he can't deal with quickness and speed on the outside. They'll kill him. And one reason why I don't like moving Brandel to the outside, Dave, is specifically because he has to line up a lot closer to the line of scrimmage now than he did last year or the year prior, because they're really enforcing that. That's one of the big points of emphasis for the NFL officiating crews this year. You have to be lined up. You can't be like kind of close where it's like, all right, dude, you're lined up pretty deep. Well, now they're making you line up almost flat. And that's going to make it even harder for a guy like Brandel to be able to kick step and get back, because he couldn't do it before. And now he's at a higher difficulty level now. And then you have the other aspect, which we talked about earlier, replacing 2 positions. I think because it's Dalton Risner at left guard, I think it's a much easier pill to swallow, per se, than if you were to bring, like, if it was Dan Feeney. Like, if it was Dan Feeney, if you look at the skill sets as the same, which they're not, but humor me here. Feeney has never played an offensive snap in the regular season with this unit. Risner played half of a season. So you're looking at a guy who is essentially the incumbent at left guard going into the year. So I think that could work. I trust Brandel less on the edge than I do Questenberry because of the quickness element. And to me, when you look at some of the edge rushers coming up, guys like Trayvon Walker, who's got length and burst for days, Josh Hines Allen, both with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Kwity Paye, who is one of the quickest off the ball with the Indianapolis Colts. And you have Dayo Odeyingbo, who nearly had a scoop and score to win that game on Sunday against the Texans. There are a lot of really fast, quick rushers that the Vikings are coming up and will be facing. So is that necessarily the best use of your assets? And I think that's an interesting part of this conversation. Brandel, when he locks up with you, you're done. He's really good once he engages. The problem is being able to get out and engage those fast rushers. He can get burned, and he can get burned quick because he doesn't have the best arm length in the world. It's 33.5 inches. It's fine. It's capable for tackle, but it's not what you'd like, especially when you have guys like Walker, who I think he's got 36-inch arms. Like, he's going to obliterate them. And to me, I think it makes it too much of a concern where I would not want to make that choice. And I think one of the things with the what do you call it? Hopefully that sounds just a little bit.
There we go.
Yeah. Eagles offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland.
Mm-hmm.
His theory is you never replace 2 positions; you always replace 1. And when you have one guy go out, you don't try and mess with 2 spots; you'll always try to mess with 1. And we've had that conversation. I think you could argue that you could go against it because of the Dalton Risner thing. And I wonder what the Vikings will do, because Blake Brandel was asked explicitly about it. Well, what did he say? Absolutely nothing. He's like, I'm not going to tell you. Of course. You know what? Even as a journalist, when you know you're not going to get an answer, that doesn't mean you don't ask the question, because you never know what you're going to get when you ask the question. Always ask the question. And Kevin Seifert did a great job there, because you have to ask. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen at left tackle. I think we're going to see some things in practice over the course of the next week. I wonder what those are going to be.
We're not going to see it in practice. They're not going to let us know until the start of the game. Maybe Saturday.
They're probably going to see somebody. There are a few outside options that the Vikings could entertain. One option that I think people will mention is Tyron Smith, left tackle for the New York Jets. He's 35 years old. We're 34. He's an older guy. He signed a 1-year, $6.5 million deal. Dave, that's a very complicated deal. He has a maximum of $20 million available to him on this deal. So let's talk about it. If he plays 38% of all the offensive snaps, $750,000. If he gets up to 44%, it's $1.75 million. So the first set of playtime incentives, if he plays 68% of all the offensive snaps, he gets $5.75 million. Second level of playtime incentives, if he gets up to 98% of the snaps, he makes an additional $6.25 million. And there's tiers in there. So if he plays 86% of the snaps, he gets $9.5 million extra in his pocket. A lot of money. A lot of money. And that's something I don't know if the Vikings would be willing to do, because they're going into this stretch run and you're looking at maybe paying a guy upwards of $11 extra million. I think that would be something you have to negotiate with Tyron Smith, because here's the thing. Tyron Smith is starting to get to a point where he's going to be washed soon, but he is an insane left tackle. He was drafted like 20 years old by the Cowboys. I think it was 2008. But he's just so good. And I don't see a scenario where they trade for him because of the contract. Chris Thompson mentions Rashawn Slater. Yeah, Rashawn Slater's in the same class as Darrisaw. They're about to give him $30 million. He's not going to be a guy that they're going to trade for. The only one that I thought is a maybe is Jedrick Wills from Cleveland, if you're going to make a trade. He was picked in, I think, 10th or 11th overall in 2020. Yeah, the 2020 draft year. Out of Alabama, solid player. Hasn't really developed at the rate that you would want. So maybe he's a guy worth throwing a flyer on, especially when he's in the 5th-year option of his deal. One that Will Raggets floated earlier today was Cam Robinson. I'm going to quote you, Dave.
Will watched Two Old Bloggers because Darren brought that up first.
Well, I'm going to tell both Will and Darren why they're wrong. I talked to a Jaguars analyst who I respect more than almost anybody in the world about the idea of trading for Cam Robinson. And here's the quote. Please take him. Cam Robinson sucks. He's bad. He's bad. And he's overpaid and he's bad.
But if you go by PFF grades, which is all we have,
yeah,
he's decent. Middle 60s.
Dave, they benched him for Walker Little.
I'm just saying.
Bad.
I agree.
To me, Cam Robinson's an absolute no. I'd rather roll with the guys we have. I did find 3 veteran options on the free agent market that I think are worth a phone call. DJ Humphries. He was a first-round pick of the Cardinals in 2015. He played 922 snaps last year. He was relatively solid. 4 sacks and 28 pressure across 15 games. I think he might be the type of guy that only is waiting. Well, one, I think he suffered a torn ACL last year, and that's why he's still waiting on this deal. But he's also waiting because, hey, there's going to be a team that needs a tackle. I can capitalize on a decently high prorated contract, and we can go from there. I think he's probably the best option. 2 others that I would call David Bakhtiari. I think his knees are shot and he's done. If he passes a physical and he's good enough, it's worth it. It's worth trying. Because Bakhtiari, before he tore his ACL, was the best left tackle in football. He was great. So that's worth a phone call. Is he going to be healthy enough? I would say no. But I would call and inquire. Because you know what? Hosting for a visit costs a few $1,000s, doesn't hit the salary cap. It's worth a try. Lastly, Donovan Smith. Smith was objectively bad with the Chiefs last year, but he's a veteran presence. He has played some good football in his past. Maybe if you give him a little bit of help, I think he could arguably be an improvement over the other guys that you have on the roster. That's a veteran minimum kind of move, though. I wouldn't be willing to give him anything else. But those are the three options I looked at with current free agents. Charles Leno Jr. was an interesting option, but I'm pretty sure he's retired. And that's why he did not come back to the Commanders this offseason. So there's not a whole lot of guys outside of the organization that you can really point to as, hey, I think this guy could be an improvement. And I see Brian in the chat saying improve the defense and replace Darrisaw by trading for a top interior defensive lineman. Sure, but you can't ignore like arguably the second most important position in football, and that's left tackle. Like, if you think you can upgrade it, I think you have to try. As long as you're not giving up like your first round pick or something, like that would be really bad. But
what would you think of putting Rouse in there and letting him learn?
No, I don't think so. I think he's too green. I think he needs time. I think he's probably going to be better long-term at guard. I actually think he'd be a competitor to start at guard next year. Like, I think he's got some skills, but he's got some of the same quickness and agility issues that Brandel does. And one of the things playing at Oklahoma did for him last year, why he allowed 0 sacks, is because they ran a lot of the RPO game, like read option kind of stuff. And when you do that, you're always run blocking. You're not pass blocking. You're not doing true pass sets. You're not kick stepping. And that mitigates a lot of speed rushers. So the way college offenses have to play you are significantly different than pro defenses. Like, I think he's a ways away. And I also think that's okay. He's a 6th round pick. It's okay to be a ways away. It doesn't have to be in a situation where, hey, he's a draft pick. You throw him in there. If the season's over, throw him in there and get him some reps. Absolutely. But we're 5-2. And we are like 10 days away from talking about this being a Super Bowl team. So I would say no on Rouse. But I'm open to the idea down the road if other options, either 1, don't work, or 2, you're out of it. Because I think that's when you really have the conversation of, hey, we should get guys some reps.
Or it turns into 2016 and you don't have anybody left.
I know. 2016. God bless Jake Long.
Mm-hmm.
Tore his Achilles for the vet minimum.
Now, Chris asked.
He was pretty good before he tore it too.
Yeah. Chris asked, what players would you throw into a deal to get a real deal offensive tackle? Now, this is where I get hesitant. People may want to trade for a good offensive tackle, but you got to remember, Darrisaw's coming back. And you're trading for a rental, basically, if you're going to get somebody from the outside to just play this season. So are you willing to pay a lot in draft capital or player capital for a rental? Now, there are players on the squad that could definitely be traded. Your lower end, guys, Evans, cornerback, special teamer, right? Sure. Throw him in there. Whatever. That's fine. But other than that, you're not going to do it. You're not going to trade somebody like Addison. As Chris says, you're not going to do that. Those guys have plans for next year. And Kwesi's got to think about next year as well as this year. It's not going to happen. Not that I see. I would be shocked. Now, I've been shocked before, but I would be shocked if they traded for some big name tackle just to have him as a half-season rental, a little more than half-season.
Now, here's my other question, Dave. Who are you trading for? Who is going to trade their tackle? Because I think that's the other aspect of this conversation. Nobody's going to trade their tackle.
Right. Well, it's like
that's the other part.
Simmons and Sexy Dexy. Yes, everybody in Minnesota fandom wants one of those two. My preferred one is Dexter Lawrence, but I'll take Simmons. But both of those teams are like, no, these are our building blocks. We're not letting them go. And they feel that way about their left tackles, too, if they've got good left tackles. It's just the way the league works. They are so far and few between. We talk about a left tackle, a good one, being found once a generation, right? Or once every 10 years. They don't grow on trees. And to think that some other team's going to give theirs away, even if you give them trade stuff, no. It's not going to happen. There isn't, unless you trade away Justin Jefferson, which is a no-go, it's not going to happen. Sorry. And it's not worth it for half a season. Because we get Darrisaw back next year.
I think trading for
week 1.
I think trading for rental's fine, but it's the capital that you're trading for a rental. Are you trading a 5th round pick, or are you trading a significant asset? Because I don't view a 5th round pick as a significant asset. I think all draft picks are good assets and ones that you want to have, but it's not a first, it's not a second.
Right.
Even a third, I think, would be a significant asset. And remember, the Vikings cannot trade the comp third that they're getting for Kirk Cousins. They can't trade that until they receive it, which is going to be in February or March. So looking at it, I don't know, Dave. I don't know what the Vikings would actually be able to get. I think it's a really tough sell right now for this team. Like, even if somebody is willing to trade their left tackle, the cost might be too prohibitive. And teams aren't exactly willing to give up left tackles because there's a shortage of offensive linemen. There's a massive shortage of offensive linemen across the league.
Of quality ones, yes.
Yeah.
As we know, being Vikings fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of move on. I think we spent a good amount of time talking about what the Vikings could end up getting as far as who the replacement for Darrisaw would be. Time will tell. I think they will look outside the organization. Will they find anybody they like? I don't know. But it wouldn't shock me if they've signed a veteran to the practice squad and kind of see what happens. A lot of times teams will do this with veterans and at positions where, somebody gets injured, and just kind of play it out, because 2 or 3 weeks on the practice squad really doesn't do anything. It's a practice squad spot, but it could end up being impactful for helping your team down in a playoff run. So we'll keep an eye on that. What I want to talk about next is how the Vikings are going to, how they should, modify their offense because Darrisaw is out. I think this is an aspect that people aren't talking about. The Vikings offense is essentially built because they have Darrisaw and O'Neal. They have a solid interior when it comes to pass blocking. Maybe not individually, but as a unit. As a unit, this team is very good at pass blocking. They're very good at sustaining blocks. So one of the metrics that you can use, and I don't like this metric for a lot of things, but I like it when you're talking about it in this context because it's based on time. ESPN's pass block win rate measures blocks that are sustained for more than 2.5 seconds. The Minnesota Vikings pass block win rate is at 65%, which is 8th in the National Football League. Sam Darnold's time to throw is 1st in the National Football League according to Next Gen Stats at 3.1 seconds. In turn, the Vikings' EPA per dropback is top in the NFL in neutral situations at 0.037. Essentially, the Minnesota Vikings are holding the ball a long time, getting good pockets from their offensive line, and throwing it downfield for big chunk plays. Those are all good things, especially when in unison together. Problem is, when you don't have Christian Darrisaw, how impactful are those things going to be, Dave? I can't tell you that they're going to be good. I can't tell you that it's a good thing. I can't tell you that they're going to be able to sustain it. That's a very, very difficult thing to be able to block that well for that long. And it's one of the reasons why I've talked about the Ed Ingram pressure numbers are really not as bad as you think they are, because they're being asked to play at this extremely high difficulty level. Now, I will say Sam Darnold's taking way too many sacks. Some of them are he's being a bozo. This little spin-a-rooney rollout to the left has cost the Vikings multiple sacks this year. Just roll to the right, buddy. It's okay. Like, I don't know what the deal is. It's probably a comfort thing for him. It's probably just like a, hey, I'm just going to default to this. But it's getting very annoying. But if the Vikings want to sustain a really good passing game, Dave, they need to go in a more quick game. They need to do more stick. They need to do more slants. They need to do more like detailed style screens. They need to run like option routes across the middle to TJ Hawkinson, which I guarantee you are coming back. They need to do more of this kind of stuff to alleviate the pressure on the offensive line. Kevin O'Connell loves those 7-step drops with the play action fake. And you know what? They worked really well this year. How are they going to work without Darrisaw? That's an adjustment I think is going to have to be made. And it's a frustrating one because the offense has really clicked. It's done a really good job. But now you're going to have to make some adjustments because you don't have the same personnel. And by adding the more quick game, and then you can really focus on running the ball, I think you could really see some positive results. Because Christian Darrisaw, one of the best run blocking tackles in the league, that dude just bullies people and throws people to the ground. It's
not just run blocking. He's one of the best top 3 tackles, both run blocking and pass blocking in the league, and 3 isn't the number.
I love Darrisaw. I love him so much. I miss him already. It's a problem. I loved him coming out too. He was my second graded tackle ahead of guys like Rashawn Slater. The only one who's behind is Penei Sewell. Dave, I think I got that right.
I think you did too.
Sewell 1, Darrisaw 2. I feel pretty good about that one right now. But it's just such a difficult task to replace Darrisaw. So you have to try and replace him in the aggregate. And by replacing him in the aggregate, you're going to have to use more chips. You're going to have to use more double teams. You're going to have to use more heavy personnel sets. And you're going to have to run the football more and use quick game. But you can do all of those things. And it's not like the Vikings are incapable of doing any of them. It's such a very interesting conversation. And I hope that the Vikings take that advice. I hope they try to utilize some of that this week. And they're going to be facing the Colts, who I believe are still the heaviest cover 3 team in the NFL. Pepper those seams to guys like Addison Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. Pepper them. Pepper it to death. Don't stop. Seam. And run the ball, because this team can run the ball against the Indianapolis Colts. They're one of the worst run defenses in the league. That's kind of how I would attack it. I think we'll kind of see how the Vikings adapt without Darrisaw. I think it's harder to judge how they're going to adapt in the course of the game where he gets hurt. Because in the course of the game where he gets hurt, like, there's not really a time to adapt and adjust, like, in a significant way. Chris asked, would it be easier to move Brandel to right tackle and have O'Neal move to left? Well, now you're replacing 3 positions. O'Neal's never played left tackle in the NFL. He's played right tackle exclusively since 2018. I think that would be a mistake. Not to say that O'Neal can't play left tackle, but why would you want to replace 3 positions? I don't see that as a net positive. Now, and I said, like, left tackle is the most important position outside of quarterback on the team, but right tackle is getting increasingly more important because pass rushers aren't just going off the blind side anymore. They're coming from everywhere. Like back in the 90s, if you had a guy like Reggie White or Chris Dolman, you're putting them on the blind side of the quarterback. Now it doesn't matter. You have great pass rushers that rush on the other side of the line. TJ Watt? Well, no, it doesn't. because you have guys like TJ Watt, Danielle Hunter, who are exclusively going up against right tackles.
No,
Like,
I don't doubt the quality of the pass rusher and coming from the right side. Where it matters is the left side is generally the blind side, and you need to be able to trust the blind side tackle.
But I'm saying that the difference in quality between what you need from your left and right tackle is basically non-existent anymore. Right. Because the guys that you're going up against are of equal skill set, because they're playing on both sides instead of almost exclusively going up against the left tackle. So
but you default to the left because the right side, the quarterback could at least theoretically see him coming.
But my point is, you don't move Brian O'Neill, a position that he's played for 7 years, because you want a left tackle. You just got to figure out a way to replace left tackle in the aggregate. And I think the Vikings are going to find a way, because they are 4-3 without Christian Darrisaw. Since he made his NFL debut, I don't count the 4 games he missed before he made his NFL debut in 2021. Since he made his debut, he has missed 7 games. The Vikings are 4-3 in those games. They can find a way to win without him. I don't want to find a way to win without him, but they can do it, and they've proven that they can do it. And I believe that number is 3-2 under head coach Kevin O'Connell. So it's possible. They can find a way to do it. Will they? Well, we're going to have 10 games to find out. Lastly, before we go, a couple things. Trade deadline is next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Central Time. We talked extensively, more than just about anybody, about making a trade at the deadline, about who the Vikings could be targeting. I brought up multiple names. Ben Gessling dropped a name. And when Gessling drops a name, you got to kind of take it seriously. Cleveland Browns cornerback Greg Newsome II. He's been relegated to nickel corner for the Cleveland Browns. But he can play on the outside, and he's very good. He's a first-round pick in 2021. This would be a TJ Hawkinson type move to keep him long-term. He is under the 5th-year option next year, like $13 million. So you could easily lower that number with an extension. And even if you don't, you have the money to be able to absorb that next year. This year, he's like close to a minimum contract because of how things are structured with like first round picks and their contracts. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think the Vikings should try to be really aggressive in making a move for a guy they see as a long-term piece to this roster, but they don't have to make a move. Don't feel like you have to make a trade just to make a trade. I think they're going to. I think they're going to find one that makes sense. And you're going to find one that they can utilize long term. I don't think they have to make a trade just to make a trade. And I think that is going to be a really impactful thing for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll find out who and what they try to do, but they don't have to make a trade just to make a trade. And I see Jason saying that Titans said Jeffrey Simmons will not be traded. This is where I want you guys to use your media literacy skills a little bit. Read into the words that people are saying. Our own Buck Rising at AZ Sports said that he reported the Titans are not interested in trading Jeffrey Simmons. Notice the verbiage. Now, we are not trading Jeffrey Simmons. We are not interested in trading Jeffrey Simmons. The phrasing here is very important. Diana Rossini also had something. I'm going to pull it up here because it's really important because she used some different phrasing as well. If my computer would stop being slow. Like, the verbiage that they use is so important. The Vikings are not interested in trading Stephon Diggs. Remember that?
Or Jerry Rice.
Mm-hmm.
Not Jerry Rice, but who am I thinking of?
Percy Harvin. All right. This is the full paragraph from Diana Rossini's Saturday column. Tennessee spent the most money of any team this offseason to build up a depleted roster. Yet, as head coach Brian Callahan hunts for the second win of his head coaching career, most around the league see the Titans as a rebuild. That said, one player I expect to be off limits is star defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons. I know that teams such as the Lions, Ravens, and Vikings would love to add a piece to their defense, but the Titans consider Big Jeff a big part of their future. I expect to eat dinner tonight. I expect to pet Odie later. I expect Dave and I to go live at 6:05 on Wednesday night. Nowhere in there is there definitive that the Titans are not going to trade Jeffrey Simmons. These words that these insiders say are explicit for a reason. There is a rhyme or reason for every single word. There's a reason why they
commercial, Chris. That's why.
Mm-hmm. Nowhere have they said the Titans will not trade Jeffrey Simmons. There's always been a caveat word in there to keep some form of ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing about insiders.
Or it tells you the price isn't high enough.
Insiders get information for a reason. They build relationships. In order to get information, they have to parrot information. They have to release things. It's part of the business. Kind of sucks for the consumer, but it's part of the business. Saying things like, I expect, or aren't interested, it's all part of playing the game. Will Jeffrey Simmons be traded? My guess would be no. But that ambiguity means something. If they're offered something they can't refuse, he's probably gone. That's the way I read it.
And they're probably closer to a complete rebuild than the Giants. But the Giants, maybe, I don't think they've said absolutely no, but it makes no sense.
The Giants are a capable quarterback away from being like a playoff team, like a good team. That defense is good. They've got dudes on all three levels. The offensive line, when Andrew Thomas is healthy, because that was a big loss too, is pretty solid. Not great, but it's solid. They're developing a running game with Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary. They've got Malik Neighbors on the outside. Like, they have good players. They have good coaching. They're just starting Daniel Jones. Yep, Odie, I was talking about Daniel Jones. I know.
Now, I saw something interesting.
Okay.
Will the Vikings sell any assets? And what I saw was possibly Patrick Jones II for a sixth.
Who said that?
Dustin Baker is where I saw it written.
Ignore what Dustin Baker says. No, I'm not taking that seriously.
But it makes sense. You've got a player that's on the last year of his rookie contract. He's not in the plans for 2025. You've got Dallas Turner and Van Ginkel and everybody there already.
Sure, but they think they can make a real playoff run. They're not going to trade a key part of their pass rush, a player that they've been leaning on for 30, 40 snaps a game, because he's going to have an expiring contract.
Yeah, but what if they want to
doesn't make any sense?
Turner in more? Then
they just put Dallas Turner in more. But here's the thing. The reason why Turner isn't playing, in my opinion, has nothing to do with Patrick Jones. It has everything to do with Andrew Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel's just playing really, really well, and they want Turner doing the Van Ginkel role, and they're not putting him in other positions. Jones has been doing a lot of the nitty-gritty interior stuff. That's not Turner's game, and he's not ready to be able to do that kind of role. So, I think the only guy who could get traded is Caleb Evans, unless there is some sort of bigger package where Jones gets traded and he's a part of like a Jeffrey Simmons type deal. I don't think the Vikings are going to be sellers at here. I just don't see it. Maybe if they absolutely get throttled by the Colts and they just look pathetic on Sunday Night Football, then maybe we could have that conversation. But to me, being sellers, that's just pure hey, I'd like to get some more draft picks. I just don't see it being a plausible outcome.
That was the whole purpose of it, to get the 6th round pick.
Well, you presented it as like an actual rumor, not a speculation.
what I saw, and I'd have to bring up his article again, but that's what he wrote about.
I don't see it being a thing unless they make other additions. Like if they bring in a defensive tackle like a Jeffrey Simmons, then maybe he's expendable. But as things sit right now, he's not. And that's kind of where I land on it.
But he supposedly hasn't gotten the pressure in the last 2 games.
He's not being asked to get pressures. He's being asked to be like the crasher on stunts. He's asked to do the dirty work, the stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. And I don't think that they're ready to move on from him because I don't think they have anybody to replace what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part of it.
Anthony talks about trading Addison.
No, I don't. No, they're not going to do that.
He's in the.
What are you going to get for Addison? Plans for next year. He's going to be on the 3rd year of a rookie contract, and he's got the talent of a wide receiver 1. They're not going to move on from that. That's how you get surplus value. If Addison all of a sudden starts playing like a guy who should be making $24 million, which, look, he's running really good routes and he's getting open. The problem is, so is Jefferson, and Jefferson's getting the ball. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But having that guy on the other side is one of the reasons why Jefferson can get open like that, because it alleviates some of the pressure. Like, the whole free 3 thing, to me, is insane. Because it's like he's been posting like that since college. And like, oh, he's unhappy. Have some media literacy, people. Come on. Like, he's a wide receiver. Wide receivers post. It's fine.
Well,
it's totally
he even
fine.
explained it to Doogie today.
Yeah.
And in the locker, he goes, I've been putting that up since Penn State. It's my brand. We saw his draft pictures where he's wearing the bling and it says free 3.
Yeah.
It's his trademark. I don't know if he's trademarked it, but it's his brand.
Mm-hmm.
Davey asked, how many players like Lawrence and Simmons are there?
Not many. And those would probably be the only 2 you can get in a trade. And that's what sucks. The Vikings made a calculated bet, whether intentional or not, when they fixed the edge room this past offseason, that they could get a really good interior pass rusher come free agency. Because there were like 6 of them. All of them resigned. So getting one in a trade, like if you were able to get a Simmons, I think Simmons is more likely than Dexter Lawrence, because Lawrence just re-signed that big extension. Simmons is already in his extension. Like I just think when you look at it, Lawrence makes the most sense. Simmons makes the most sense for a lot of reasons. Like the Giants are good once they get a quarterback. That's all they need. Like if Darnold was on that team instead of Daniel Jones, like that team would be like 5-3 right now. Like they're close. Their quarterback is just atrocious. So that's kind of the way I see it. One last thing before we go. You're going to see a lot of discussion about Anthony Richardson over the course of the next week. People talking about completion percentage and all this. Just remember 2 things. One, not raw stats don't tell you the whole story. He went 10 of 32, but he had like 5 drops, and his receivers did absolutely nothing to help him out. If receivers just catch 3 of like the 7 or 8 catchable balls that he threw that were incomplete, like the Colts win that game, and they win it pretty easy. 2, this is a Josh Allen type prospect where he's wild. He doesn't have the good footwork, but he is the most accurate deep ball thrower in the National Football League as a 2nd-year guy with just 10 starts under his belt. Don't overlook him because he had a 31.8% completion percentage this week against the Texans, where Josh Allen just went 9 for 30 against them. Texans defense is just good. Don't listen to the people who are just going to parrot those stuff because they don't know anything. Just remember that. We're going to have a lot more conversation about Anthony Richardson and the Colts this upcoming week. We're going to have a lot of conversation about where the Vikings are going to go. Hopefully we have some news on what's going to happen at left tackle. We're going to have some news on how maybe they're going to evolve and adapt the scheme. I'm going to listen intently tomorrow when the coordinators have their press conferences. And then Kevin O'Connell speaks to the media again on Wednesday. We have some great stuff coming up here this week. I'm guessing we have a show from Sal tomorrow night, Scolders and Spice. We've got my show again on Wednesday. We'll have another Scolders and Spice later this week. 2 all bloggers on Saturday. And of course, the post-game show, which will be Sunday night, somewhere around the time of 10:15-ish, when we'll go live at the 2-minute warning. We're going to have a good time. Thank you guys.
If you missed it today, Sal dropped her special on what food debuted at US Bank Stadium. So if you are attending a game, you want to go see that piece, it'll be evergreen. And you can check out the lobster mac and cheese smash burger and the wonderful drinks. The Bloody Marys on 11 o'clock, or the noon games look absolutely delicious. All sorts of stuff she has got on there. Go check it out.
Perfect. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you follow the podcast feed because there will be some extra stuff, especially during draft season. I'm just going to go bozo mode and start every time I talk about a prospect, I'll just do 10, 15 minutes. We're going to have a lot of extra stuff coming this upcoming draft season, and it'll be a lot of fun. From Dave, I'm Tyler. Thank you guys so much for listening. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!